Your latest adaptation of Karson's Corner here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Ryan Roberts, Director of Recruiting here at IrishBreakdown.com. Joined, as always, by Mr. Karson Hobbs, cornerback commits in the 2024 class to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. On last week's episode, if you missed that one, we talked a lot about Karson's official visit to Notre Dame and just kind of some of his relationships that he's been developing with other commits and non-committed players in the 2024 class. Karson, catching you right after a little bit of a long day of practice and lifting, and I think you had your training as well, man. How's the summer been so far? I know it's been probably super busy for you from a preparation perspective.
The weather's been terrible. I mean, it's cloudy every day. Hasn't been really a lot of sun, but, the grind has been the same as it was every other year to staying intact with not only my weights, but my training and studying the game. So I think that's been some of the most important things that I've been doing in the offseason, just kind of stay prepared and in the loop of everything.
And I know that you have a few really talented players coming back on top of yourself. Like we talked about Jordan Marshall a lot on this show. That's going to Michigan, the running back, who's a fantastic player in 2024 as well. What is your early thoughts on the team that you guys have coming back? I know historically Archbishop Moeller is obviously a great program, but how do you feel about the team that you guys have coming back this year?
Just a lot of young guys are going to have to step up. We lost a lot of seniors, so I'm excited to see for myself exactly how we're going to do. I'm really not sure, so I think it's up in the air. I mean, we do have the potential to make a run for something special, but it just depends whether we can stay disciplined and focused throughout the whole season.
Or have you felt like you have taken like a big step forward this offseason as far as from like the leadership role now that you're a senior?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you and Jordan, I'm assuming, are kind of like the guys on the team as far as like the leadership perspective.
Yeah.
It's awesome, man. And I know that we're going to obviously talk a lot about season previews at some point on this show, obviously giving them a little insight into the Archbishop Moeller schedule. Maybe we'll break down at one point, but wanted to have a little bit of a fun discussion today. 3 segments for you all today. So number one, thought it would be kind of cool because the interesting part of this dynamic is I'm 31 years old. I'm a little bit older than Karson, obviously. So I have a little bit of a different perspective of football as far as the players I grew up watching, comparative to who Karson obviously has gravitated towards as a football lover of the game, right? So first segment, we're going to talk about the Mount Rushmore of football players. Not necessarily the best of all time, but our favorites. So we're going to create our Mount Rushmore. Second, and I think that an Irish Breakdown Nation, IB Nation, is really going to love this. We're going to talk a little bit about man versus zone coverage and kind of what some keys are pre-snap and what Karson's looking for and what his approach is on a snap-to-snap basis. And then number 3, of course, is Karson's random topic of the week. Try to give him the floor to discuss whatever is on his mind this coming week. So, Karson, Mount Rushmore, for people that don't know, and it's not much of a historical buff thing. It's just kind of general knowledge. Right. That means we have 4 figures on our Mount Rushmore, obviously out there in South Dakota, for players that I guess have stuck with us, for lack of a better term, right? Guys that we really gravitate towards. So let's go back and forth here. I'm going to give you your first pick. Your Mount Rushmore of football players and your favorites. Who would be your first guy?
Jalen Ramsey.
Okay. Why Jalen? I need to hear the reasoning behind it.
I just love his personality and his swag to him. And I love his physicality. I mean, he comes down and he'll stick somebody. No matter if it's a tight end or a running back, he gonna hit you every time.
You know what's interesting about Jalen, and I'm curious if you think that you have potential in this area as far as the versatility, because Jalen played so in college at Florida State, he played safety, he played corner, he was everywhere. And then in his NFL career, he's been mostly an outside corner, but then during the end of his Rams tenure there, he starts playing nickel. He starts playing a little bit inside, playing a little bit inside out.
Yeah, that was to try to line him up on. They said the best receiver every game, which it made sense because he is the best cover corner, I think.
Yeah,
I think he's top 2 of all time. That's just me.
Wow.
I mean, I think y'all got to watch who he lined up against. That's all. I can't say too much about it because I know even about the Jordan and LeBron argument, I got a lot of hate. So I'm not even going to comment too much on it. In my opinion, he's a top 2 cover corner ever.
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah, no, we'll save you from the fire that Twitter becomes sometimes of
Right.
controversy. So we'll save it for you. Let me ask you this, Karson, because this was one of my – I remember when I was talking to J.C. Horn when he was coming out, I told him that my favorite thing about his game was I think that the NFL specifically is going to a very matchup-dictated league. Like kind of how you said where Jalen Ramsey's going against the best receiver of all time. These corners now, the Jair Alexanders, the J.C. Horns, the Jalen Ramseys, guys that can literally line up against any different type of receiver, whether it's a quick shifty guy in the slot, whether it's a tall boundary receiver, those guys that can be mismatched weapons for a defense. Do you feel like you can do some of that stuff to be able to line up outside, nickel, to line up all over the place?
100%. I did it actually last year in our playoff semifinal game. Played nickel, boundary, and field, and wherever 7 and the other one, what was the number 13? I think had to go. So that was a fun game, and I like playing, off because getting that experience is something that you just it can only make you better.
Are you a fan of the nickel position? I know some people have a love-hate relationship with it.
I like playing nickel sometimes. It just depends, I guess, who you're going against. When you're going against a 4-2-4 low 4-3 guy, it's harder to play in the nickel. But I found it pretty. If you're patient enough, I think boundary corner is harder.
Yeah. Oh, really? Do you think it's harder?
I do. I think it's harder to play press 1 yard because that leaves less room for mistakes than it does playing 3.5, 4 yards off. You know what I mean? 4 yards off, you bite a little bit, you might be able to come back. You bite on some a yard off, you're not coming back. That's simple. It just won't happen.
Oh, man, the worst is the guys that are exclusively press man corners and you miss a jam at the line of scrimmage. It is recovery mode, man, and it is not a fun time to be able to play in recovery all the time. So I get that. So for my first member of Mount Rushmore, this was a guy that isn't that old and not really a guy that I grew up with necessarily. This was more a guy in my late teens and 20s that I gravitated towards. That was Luke Kuechly. I absolutely adored Luke, man. He was Karson, that was my guy, man, because I played linebacker, and I remember seeing him at Boston College for the first time. Because for people that don't remember, Boston College had an All-American linebacker before Luke Kuechly. His name was Mark Herslick. Mark Herslick had cancer and missed a full season, I remember. And people were like, how are they going to replace Mark Herslick? How are they going to replace Mark Herslick? And then freshman Luke Kuechly was the answer of how they replaced Mark Herslick. Since he was a freshman at Boston College, man, I have gravitated towards Luke because I love the cerebral qualities of him. He sees the game at such an advanced level, and he also, it doesn't hurt being 6'3", 240 and running 4.58. It doesn't hurt either. But that was my guy, man. That was absolutely my guy growing up. I love Luke.
He's a baller.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm still so sad that the concussions caught up to him because I really think that he could have been in the greatest linebacker of all time. Yeah. I think he could have been in that conversation.
100%. The concussions, man. I remember when he had to retire. That was terrible.
Yeah, man. He retired when he was 29, I think.
Very young.
Like that. It was young. Him and Andrew Luck were both guys that were lost way too early due to injuries. So that's still my guy. Number 2 for you would be?
Deion Sanders.
Okay. It's a classic one for a corner. Why Deion?
Trash talker. Best. They say to go. I'm still iffy, but he is, I guess, the greatest of that generation. Sure. So he set the standard for corners. I can say that he definitely set the way people look at DBs to a much higher pedestal than what it was. And now, not only is it the hardest position on the field, but now one of the most paid. So
that's true. Greatest story of all time, or one of them, is when Deion was at the combine and he ran something really fast in the 40 and he just kept running out of the tunnel, man. He didn't stop. He was, and then apparently they picked him up in the limo and he was gone. He was gone after that. What are your thoughts, kind of side note, what are your thoughts about what Deion's building out in Boulder, Colorado? Are you a fan of what he's doing out there?
Yeah. The only thing I'm not a fan of is everything being posted on social media. I think some stuff you should have just with your team to build that bond and, not let people know, what you're doing at all times. Because, just work in silence and the outcome would be strong. You see what I'm saying? So I just think I like what he's doing with the program. He's changed it. He's definitely making it a really good upcoming program. I'm just not too much of a fan of the – I'm going to give my team a motivational speech every day, and we're going to post it on social media. I love Dion. I know, he's a trash talker. He's a talky guy. But, how can you ever have a real chemistry with your team when not only your team can see what you're doing, but millions and, thousands of people that watch all the videos can see it too.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it's so tough because I agree with you, actually. I 100% agree with you because I'm a big fan of the best coaches I ever had. They didn't talk a lot, but when they did, it
meant something.
It mattered, right? Like you were just locked in. Like, yes, this guy's talking. I need to listen.
Right.
I think that some of that stuff is just trying to gain publicity to the program, which like it's cool and all, but also I agree with you that it's like there is a point where it's too much, right?
Right.
Like reel it
I
back
think that's where it's getting just everyday posting is a little too much for me, but it ain't my program. I do support Dion, and I think Colorado is definitely should be on the come up.
I think so too. And I do remember a time where Colorado was a very good college football program. So hopefully it gets back to that point.
Yep.
Number 2 for me, probably a guy you remember. Hopefully, hopefully I'm not this old or whatever. But Jared Allen, defensive ends, play with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Minnesota Vikings. I think he ended his career with right around 140 sacks. He's going to make the Hall of Fame. Yeah, man. I think it was like 136 sacks in his career or something like that. Like he was crazy story, Karson. 3rd round pick, 6'6", 265 pounds. He went to Idaho. He was Idaho State, one of those smaller Idaho schools. So he was a very underrated FCS pass rusher coming out of college and developed into one of the best pass rushers that we have ever seen. And I just loved his style, man. Because like I played linebacker, but I also played on the line of scrimmage a little bit and rushed the passer at times, right? And like I just loved his style. He had like the mullet and he had like the headband, and I just thought he was cool. Like that was just one of my guys. So yeah. So Jared Allen, number 2 for me. Number 3 for you.
Marshawn Lynch.
Okay.
I still am a Seahawks fan, so I would go with Lynch just because. Actually, I'm gonna take Lynch back. I want Cam Chancellor.
Okay.
I want Cam. So I really used to watch his highlight reel before every single game I played in the 7th and 8th grade. So I was watching all of his stuff every single week just to get me prepared. Like seeing the way he used to hit and obliterate people used to just make me want to run through a brick wall before the game even started.
That's a great one because I remember Cam when he was at Virginia Tech and you always wondered like how good he would be in pass coverage, but then he figured it out, right? It's like man on man against some tight ends and just use your physicality. And he was one of the best hitters I've ever seen. Like he was just absolutely crazy. What's nuts is as a corner, you probably could have picked 3 different guys in that Seattle secondary, like Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman. Yeah, man. Cam is a good one though. What was his name? Bam Bam, right? They used to call him. He was
Bam Bam.
He was a dog, man. He was a dog. So I respect that one. I really do. I know Brian Driscoll, that's the owner and publisher of Irish Breakdown, will like that one too because he was a big Steve Atwater fan back in the day, and I feel like Steve Atwater and Cam are very similar players with how they played. So.
Who's your 3rd?
My 3rd. This one's coming back to my childhood here. I grew up a now Los Angeles Rams fan. I was a St. Louis Rams fan when I was younger, though. So, quick story. My dad's a Dolphins fan. My mom was a Rams fan. So I had the choice. I didn't have a choice to be a Notre Dame fan. I was just a Notre Dame fan. Like, that was the only choice I had. I did have a choice of NFL teams, though. I gravitated towards, in the late 90s, early 2000s, the Rams were the greatest show on turf. And Marshall Faulk was my dude, man. My dude. I remember his little saying was, forget the big red S, Superman wears a 2 and 8 on his chest. I remember that one to this day, man. Marshall was only the 2nd running back ever to have 1,000 yards rushing and receiving in the same year, and he almost did it twice. he was dominant, man. Absolutely dominant.
And then my last one, I'm gonna go with just obviously Cam Newton. I played for 7-on-13 for a couple weeks, and not only that, but his swag and his Superman, it was always, I loved it. I've always loved watching Cam Newton.
So I have to ask you, because he's a very swaggy guy. Do you like all of the outfits that he wears? Because some of them I think OD a little bit, but that's just my opinion.
He can have trips sometimes, but sometimes he'll drown bad. Sometimes I'll be very confused on what that one is. But it's Cam.
What was it like being around Cam from a personal perspective? I've heard he's a great dude, out of the
Motivator,
spotlight. Yeah,
motivator, and also he'll be real with you. Like,
that's
hey,
great to
like
hear.
that was trash. Come on, we need to step up.
Nice, nice. Hey man, you need those guys. You need
Yeah, for
those
sure.
guys. I used to hate the coaches that would just everything was good all the time. It's like, no,
Right,
everything isn't good all the time. Like, tell me when it's not good. So
literally.
seems like an interesting cat though to get to know off the field. And he was for a couple years there, man. He was about as dynamic of a quarterback as we've ever seen in the
Ever,
NFL. Yeah,
ever. Who's your
his
fourth?
1 year. Are you old enough to remember him at Auburn, or you just remember him with Carolina?
Nah, yeah, I remember when he won the chip.
Yeah. Oh man, that year was one of the craziest years I've ever seen of a
That was the
quarterback.
greatest season of all time. That
You
was the
think
greatest
so?
quarter. That was. I think that was the greatest Heisman ever. Of 100, I think so. I think it was way better than Joe Burrow. I think that Heisman was either up there. And this is because I'm new.
Yeah.
I thought Devontae Smith had just.
Oh,
I
he
thought he
was
had
sick
the
that year.
greatest wide receiver Heisman.
That 2020 season was nuts for Devontae. You know what was crazy was Jalen Waddle was actually the leading receiver. Then he got hurt, and then Devontae just went off the rest of the year.
And I
So
think that's what I'm saying. Like, I think if he would have been able to play the whole season, the way, like, you know what I mean, and not having Waddle even there at all,
yeah,
I think he had the greatest wide receiver season of all time. That's my final opinion on that.
it's one of them. I mean, I'm thinking back to I remember Justin Blackman was incredible for Oklahoma State for a couple years. Like, there's been some guys, but yeah, I mean, he was phenomenal that year. I mean,
Right.
wide receivers don't win the Heisman very often. So to your point, it's a great accomplishment. Let's pivot now into a little bit of, I guess we'll call it Karson 101 here a little bit. We'll talk about the arts of playing defensive back because that's what it is at this point. Because we see now there's so many different coverages or combination of coverages now. And also with the match coverages that we see nowadays, zone can turn into man very quickly. So we're going to keep this on a very broad level, right? So I want to talk about your approach when you're playing man versus zone. So let's say you're in a cover 0, cover 1, whatever, right? We're talking about a two man, whatever it is. When you're approaching the line of scrimmage, when you're about to get into your stance, let's say you're in off coverage first before press.
Yep.
What are you looking at? What's going through your mind?
So it depends what size the ball in. I'll start off always by getting my right leverage. And when I get down on my stance, I try to look like right here because I realize that people say always look at the hips. I look at the hips as the route goes on because as we get closer, I start lowering my eyes and my body stays low and gets to the hip. But off the beginning, I realized that whatever way you decide to do this, your body can't come back here unless this comes back here. So when I jam you up here and you try to go there, and you can't go there no more. You're stuck in this position. So I realized that when I started paying attention to the numbers and moving where they move and move where they move and touching them right in the center of their chest, my hand would be able to stay there for a minute until they decided to move it off. And then that started to be able to give me some advantage because I was basically running the route while they were trying to run at me. I was running their own route for them.
Sure.
So that's I love playing like that. And then if I'm in zone, I try to. It depends how many people are on my side. So if it's just single receiver, I'll play outside leverage and actually man him up until he goes inside to a very shallow point. I'll wait to see if somebody else comes over top from this way. If it's 2, I'll line up inside of 1 right here, and then I'll be up here, and then 2 will be down there with the 1, and then I'll split them and divide, whether they both go seams out of bottom or something like that. And then there's 3, I play a little inside of the 1, and then 2 and 3, I know I can catch up. Usually 3 is not going to run anything in my zone because I'm playing the boundary. So they're really, 3 is probably going to run like a, little whatever swing or something like that. Maybe a screen pass. I don't know, but they never really have ran anything out the boundary.
Something to the flat, usually something out breaking.
Yep.
Yeah. So the reason that we'll talk about cover 3 for a second, just so people kind of understand. So you're playing inside leverage because you're using the sideline as an extra defender, right? Like
100%. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm inside of 1. So if 1 wants to run the fade, I'm going to widen him out as soon as he starts running up that, that line, and then try to get him to the sideline. And then also you got to be able to, get the 2 quick enough if they try to run that quick seam to the hash mark.
Yes. Yeah. So you're kind of splitting a little bit, but you're also using the sideline as an extra defender, obviously, there. Let me ask you, I think I know the answer to this one. I don't think this is going to be a hard answer, but if you had the option to play majority zone or majority man, what is your preference?
Man. Because it's so much harder, and that's where the money's at.
It is.
It's not only that's where the money's at, but that's where the fun's at. Everybody can sit there 7 yards off and just, let somebody come with their zone and cover it because nobody's going to throw it. But in man, you are tested every play for your discipline, and you get paid for with your eyes, and you get rewarded with your footwork, but you also get, sometimes the opposite. You sometimes don't get rewarded and you don't win. But I think that's the most fun part about it. Having the ups and downs and having the adversity makes the best corners who can come back.
So quick story about the man versus zone corner stuff. So my roots are in the NFL draft industry. I remember I was talking with a college defensive back coach, a secondary coach.
Right.
And he had a corner. It was Division II. He had a corner that was getting a lot of NFL looks named Junior Falk. He was a really good football player out of Delta State. And I remember I hadn't seen film on him. So I asked the coach, because I knew scouts were coming in there all the time. I asked the coach, what kind of corner is he? Is he like to play man? Is he zone? Like whatever. And the coach just laughed at me. And he was like, no scout is coming to see a zone corner. Nope. Everybody wants a man corner. So to your point. Because you're not wrong. I mean, the biggest indictment in the NFL draft industry, I can say this for a fact, is when you say that corner fits best as a cover 2 zone corner. It's
that's not good because everybody
can do that.
Yeah. Everybody can, but no, not a lot of people can play man. You able to press the best shooters in the NFL. You see them guys getting paid.
Yeah. Well, last part of this that I wanted to check up on and curious about. So I know you like to press a lot. You like to get in press man. You like to get in guys' grills. Talk to me, because I think people just talk about the hands, right? Jamming. How important is the eyes and the feet in press coverage?
Oh, well, if your hands move before your feet, you already lost. So, you got to activate your feet first, and you got to wait for them to get done with the dance. Stick, sometimes even as soon as the play, they say, Hike, I'll give me a quick stick in, just throw them off a little bit. And it's so much you can do with it. I actually like to switch it up because obviously you're repetitive on film and you get repetitive in the game. People know what you do. So I try to always make it seem like I might jam you before the play even starts. I line up like I'm about to jam you, then boom, off the line. I've seen it a bunch of times. Some people get false starts. Some people come off hesitating, wonder what I'm going to do, getting ready to wasting time. The goal is to knock the receiver off of their route and waste as much time as possible so that way the quarterback can look them off or throw you a pick.
That's a very good deep dive there, especially, and we'll get more in depth about maybe more specifically into some coverages in the future. Right. But I really think, guys, I hope you all like that out there because I think that's a lot of great stuff. Karson, before we wrap up, random topic of the week. Anything on your minds? What do you want to talk about to end this podcast?
Oh yeah, what brand did you want Notre Dame to partner with?
Oh man, I have so many mixed feelings. I just don't want it to be Under Armour, to be honest.
Oh, no.
Like that's all I'm at right now. I mean, I know that there's a lot of pushback against Nike. I do think Nike makes some great stuff. Jordan would be interesting. I've seen the Jordan stuff kind of thrown out there a little bit. Like that would be super interesting to me. But as long as it's not Under Armour, honestly, I'll be okay. Do you have a preference?
Jordan. I think Jordan cleats and everything would be amazing.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is there's some rumors, and we talked about this on the show before, that there might be a deal with the jerseys and the pants. Someone proposed this, that you make a deal that with the outfitter for the jerseys and the pants, and then players can do their own shoe deals so that they can mix and match brands if they feel like it, and then they could profit off of the shoe deals, which is kind of interesting.
That would be interesting. It would just look a little off having an Adidas shoe brand with all Jordan or all Nike.
Well, it's true, and I remember I mixed brands sometimes. Honestly, Karson, when I grew up,
I'm wearing Lululemon, Under Armour, and Nike. So
I used to get made fun of so bad, man. People would be like, "You can't mix brands, man. If it ain't checked, it ain't correct." So I'm just like, "Oh, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry," but that's kind of where we are, though. Interesting, though, and I feel like because obviously Notre Dame has a big decision to be made with that moving forward here, as well as the TV contract that'll be coming up. So we'll definitely hit on some of that in the future. Karson, I ask you to do this at the end of every podcast. For the people out there listening, they should have done this already, but if they haven't, social media tags, man. Where are you going?
My name is just Karson Hobbs. See bottom part of the corner. That's my Instagram handle. Exactly right there. And then my Twitter handle is just Karson Hobbs 1.
That's it. So go make sure you follow Karson on both Instagram and Twitter right now. Irish Breakdown Nation, if you haven't before. This is Karson's Corner. Karson, thank you so much, man. I know it's busy times again. We're making this work, though, man, and I love this segment each and every week. Make sure to like, subscribe to the podcast, hit that notification bell. And also, if you love Karson's Corner, make sure to go on Apple Podcasts or any of your favorite podcast platforms and give us a little review. We would very much appreciate it. You can also hit us up on Twitter if you love it as well. Thank you all so much again. Brought to you by Irish Breakdown Podcast. This is this week's edition of Karson's Corner.
Peace.